Thank you for joining us tonight from the comfort of your own homes. We hope everyone is hanging in there. I'm Jamie, the Adult Program Coordinator at the Deerfield Public Library, and I want to give a very warm welcome to Jessica Mlinaric, author of Sweet Chicago. We hope you're ready for a fun-filled webinar full of weird Chicago locations. A couple of tips for the webinar if you haven't used Zoom before, which I'm sure you have at this point. Maybe you're over-Zoomed at this point, but welcome. If you have a question, there's a chat box at the bottom of the screen. You are welcome to use that at any time during the presentation, and Jessica will be answering those near the end of the program. And during the presentation, there will be trivia questions. Please put your answers in the chat box. There are no prizes except for bragging rights, but what could be better than that? Now, please let us know if you have anyone joining you on your device for the webinar so that we can get an accurate count of attendance. You can do that in the chat box. So if you have 2 people seeing your screen, you could just put in a 2. If you have a 3, 3. If you're the only one viewing your screen, no need to put anything in there. So, all right, and I will turn it over to Jessica. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm Jessica, the author of Secret Chicago. So excited to be here with you. Thank you to Jamie and the Deerfield Library for having me, and to all of you who are taking the time to be here tonight. I'm coming to you live from my home office in the Wicker Park neighborhood, and I'm so excited that we can all be together in some form to share these secret places. I know that many of our summer travel plans may be getting disrupted right now, but I think it's even better reason to look around in our own backyards for something interesting. So if you love Chicago, you are in the right place, and you're also in the right place if you love weird stories. I've got plenty of both to share with you in the next hour. Chicago has a lot of secrets to give up tonight, and I would like to keep things interactive, so I'm going to be doing a bit of reading, but also some trivia. So as Jamie mentioned, if you have an answer to some of the questions I'm going to ask, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. And I definitely want to leave time at the end for all of your questions, as well as just sharing some of your favorite secret places. And at the end, if you are interested in learning more, I'll have a discount code for anyone who's interested in purchasing the book. So hopefully, no matter how long you've lived in the area, there will be some surprises in store for you tonight. And I'd like to start off by learning a little bit about all of you. So I'm going to throw up a poll question about where did you grow up? Hopefully you can see that on your screen, whether it's Chicago, the Chicagoland area, or somewhere else. Seeing a lot of Chicago, and I will share that. Yeah, mostly Chicago and Chicagoland tonight. I think that's a little bit different than the first night that, the first Deerfield event that we did. So that's interesting. A bit about me. I am not from Chicago originally. I actually grew up in Cleveland. And how did I get started writing about Chicago? Well, I moved here 10 years ago-ish. And I was just so excited to be in a new place. I started asking questions about the things that I would see around town as I was going on jogs and walks and biking. And I began, asking people who were from the area, and maybe they hadn't noticed some of these things before. So I started investigating them on my own and writing about it on a blog that I created. And then after that, I started writing for some other publications around town. So eventually, I had enough of these places saved up to start writing a book. So you could say that I've been writing this for 10 years, but the actual book process took me about a year. And a quick intro to the book. Here it is. It is available at the Deerfield Library when you're allowed to visit again. I know that you've got curbside pickup going on now. But it features 90 places in and around Chicago that are a little offbeat. It's a bit of a scavenger hunt to hidden parts of the city that you may or may not be familiar with. And I'm hoping that whether you are from the area originally or you're just visiting and you're looking to get off the beaten path a little bit, that there will be some surprises in store for you. And I really just wanted to get people curious about different parts of the region. So I'm going to answer a few frequently asked questions about how I wrote the book. What did I consider a secret? Well, I defined a secret as either something that is physically hidden or a place that you might be familiar with, but you don't know there's a crazy backstory behind it. And how did I find all these places? Well, I did a lot of reading, so shout out to our libraries. And I did get a lot of ideas just by asking anyone that I encountered. So a lot of just bumping into strangers at a party or an event and telling them about my project and asking if they knew any secrets. So I definitely want to ask you guys about your secrets later. It was important for me to feature places all across the area. So I started by mapping out those first places that I wrote about on my blog. And then I looked for the holes in the map, the areas that I hadn't covered, and targeted those areas. So I talked to community groups, historical societies, bloggers in those regions, and also bartenders, because they are the true secret keepers of any neighborhood. You can imagine that it was not easy to narrow down. There are so many interesting stories to tell in the city, but I had a few criteria. I wanted it to be accessible for people to visit. I wanted there to be something for people to look at, so it's not just an empty parking lot. And hopefully, even if I'm presenting a place that is well known, I'm able to offer a unique angle to it and something you may not have known about. So I'd like to ask you guys another question, and I want to know, what brought you here tonight? What are you most interested in learning about? Learning about different neighborhoods, history, some museums and culture, architecture. Oh, you guys are a group after my own heart. They're all my favorite things. All right, looks like history and neighborhoods are winning. I'll share that with you guys. That's so exciting to see, because one of the most surprising things that I found when I was researching the book was when I went to different neighborhoods and spoke with people in those communities, and even just talking to some of my friends, how much of the city that other people hadn't been to or hadn't visited. I think when Chicago is such a large place, it can be intimidating to get across town and check out something new. You may not know where to start. So that's something that I hope this book can help with. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to start these secret places as trivia. And again, type the answer into the chat if you think you know. Normally, I like to hand out candy from one of my favorite places in the book, Dulcelandia, but today I'll just read your name and have bragging rights, as Jamie said. So, number one, does anyone know where Chicago's smallest cemetery is? Oh, I just saw Cindy's message. She loves Cleveland and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Flats. I do too, thank you. It's a fun place. It's like Chicago, but much smaller. There is a bridge. It's not near the Chinatown Bridge. This is probably one that many people haven't been to, and it's one of my favorites in the book. So this is actually in a junkyard, believe it or not, specifically at 93rd and Ewing on the southeast side. And you're not reading that wrong. His tombstone says the Battle of Waterloo. So how did poor Andreas here end up on the south side? Because this is one of my favorite stories, I'm going to actually read this excerpt to you. Okay. Is a soldier's grave hidden in a south side scrapyard? A scrapyard on Chicago's southeast side isn't what you would call a peaceful resting place. Between the industrial setting and rusting machinery, it's the last place you'd want to spend eternity. But burial here was one man's last wish, and it's still honored today. Andreas von Zerngebel's story started far from Chicago. He was born in Bavaria in 1797 and joined the Prussian army at age 18. He even helped defeat Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, where he lost an arm. Afterward, Andreas started a family and began a career as a fisherman. In 1854, von Zerngebel moved to the small town of Chicago with his wife and 5 children. He bought 40 acres of land along the Calumet River for $160 in gold. He settled there and resumed the fishing trade on Lake Michigan. Just a year after arriving in Chicago, von Zerngebel died of a fever. According to legend, his last wish was to be buried on his homestead. His family marked the grave with a wooden cross and built a white picket fence around the grave. Although they moved to the north side, they continued to visit over the years. Decades later, the Calumet and Chicago Canal and Dock Company acquired the land. Andreas's relatives disputed ownership in the Illinois Supreme Court. The family claimed that their property deed was lost in the Great Chicago Fire, but the company claimed that von Zerngebel was a squatter. The court ruled that the company owned the land, but that the grave must remain intact no matter what. And the family was granted permanent access to the gravesite. Industry grew up around the former homestead. Today, concrete blocks mark the grave where a wooden cross once did. At about 100 square feet, it may be the city's smallest cemetery, but its caretakers over the years have honored von Zerngebel's last wish. So this scrapyard is actually closed now, but you can still see the grave from the bridge over the Calumet River on Ewing. And the Southeast Side Historical Society also gives tours of it occasionally, so you can check out for that. And you can see in this photo the concrete barriers around it protecting the grave here. That's because the headstone was actually knocked over a few times with all the equipment going back and forth across the yard. So they've got it pretty well protected now. And you also see there's some wildlife starting to grow up in there. So hopefully the area may look more like it did when Andreas moved here eventually one day. Yes, Frank, very good point. He noticed that this headstone, I think it says 1816 Battle of Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo was 1815. I don't know why why the typo on the headstone here, or how long it's been like that. I'm not sure. Good catch. All right, I think a few people will get this one. What do the call letters for WLS AM 890 stand for? What is the WLS? J and D and Corinne, Frank and Matt, Rita, Nina, Stephen, Mary. Okay, everyone's got this one. It's the world's largest store. And I'm guessing you guys know what the world's largest store refers to. Corinne and Nina, correct. It is Sears. Mary and Rita, Barbara. Awesome. So Sears built their commercial headquarters in the North Lawndale neighborhood in 1906. And part of it was the world's largest commercial building at the time. Next to this giant, massive building was this 14-story tower that they called the Sears Tower. So you can see at the top here, Sears Roebuck at the top of the tower there. And in 1924, WLS started broadcasting from the 11th floor of this tower here. Now we know that Sears moved their headquarters downtown in 1974 to the Sears Tower, which is not the Sears Tower anymore. So that's the old Sears Tower. And I guess that makes this tower the old Sears Tower. These days, the old Sears Tower is known as the Nichols Tower. And it was recently restored. It has a lot of nonprofit offices, and there's a lovely event space on the top there. You can see this photo looking east is taken from the event space at the top there with those lovely arched windows that you can see. All right. Looks like we have some Chicago history buffs. So you might know where the first nuclear reaction occurred. Anybody? Rita got it. Stagfield, Stephen, yes, it's at the University of Chicago. So we know this happened at the University of Chicago in 1942 as part of the Manhattan Project. But where is the reactor located now? Anybody know? So I'm seeing argon, and PB got Redgate Woods. That's correct. So this is actually located in the Cook County Forest Preserve. It didn't go too far. It's buried around the Redgate Woods area. And this was once part of a top secret nuclear research facility, Argonne. Argonne has since moved, so this is not where Argonne is currently today. This was at a previous facility. So if you said Argonne, that was correct, technically, I guess, but it's not at their current facility now. So they decommissioned the facility in the 1950s, and they took the nuclear reactors, 2 of them, and a bunch of other lab waste that it was contaminated, and they just took it out in the woods and buried it. After all these years, it is said now to be safer to leave it buried than to try to move it at this point. And they do radiation testing. I think when they were testing in the 1970s, it was a little dicey, some levels of radioactivity, but these days it is said to be safe. So if you are hiking in the forest preserve, it is currently open to hike around this area. You may come across a surprise. There are 2 stone markers. So there's this one commemorating the first reactor, and this one that's commemorating the other nuclear waste. So it is safe to visit, but like the sign says, just don't dig. All right. Does anyone know where you can see priceless works of art by Mary Cassatt, Grant Wood, and over 100 Chicago area artists for free? It's not a school. It's not the Art Institute. Do they do, oh, they do free days for Illinois residents. That's true. It is a park district building, Rosalie. So this is actually in the Chicago Park District's Ridge Park Fieldhouse. It's called the Vanderpool Art Collection, and it's named after John Vanderpool, who lived in the neighborhood in Beverly. He was an artist and an educator. He was actually a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago, and he was one of Georgia O'Keeffe's favorite art teachers, actually. He passed away in 1911, and when he died, a bunch of his friends and family and admirers started donating works of art in his name. So this collection is entirely donated, which is pretty incredible. And it now resides in a quiet gallery here in a park field house. They've got about 200 pieces on view. That's not even their whole collection. They have some others in storage because they just simply can't fit everything that they have. But it's really cool because on the first floor, and on a normal day, not in our current times, but you would see kids going to summer camp and playing basketball, downstairs running around, and then you go up to the second floor and there's this incredible priceless collection, and you can just visit it for free. It's just tucked away there. And the curator is named Sidney Hamper. He knows the story behind all of these paintings, who donated them, what their relationship was to John Vanderpool. So it's a really beautiful space. I don't believe it is open currently, but I recommend checking it out at some point. All right, has anyone ever told you to run away and join the circus? If so, you can do that in Chicago. What building in Logan Square hides the circus? Any guesses? None of you are running away to the circus anytime soon. All right, this is at a church, actually. So this is called Aloft Circus Arts, And they offer classes in things like trapeze, aerial silks, a trampoline, all located inside a former evangelical church from 1908. And it's been converted into a different kind of big top here. So you can see the high ceilings are perfect for circus rigging, and even their bell tower is being used for training now. So if you want to go pro, they have a 2-year program for circus professionals. Or if you just want to test it out, they have a taster class normally for $10, where you can just kind of get introduced to the different kinds of things they offer. They also offer a show one Saturday a month where they feature their students who are in training. And I've been to this show live in person, and it's incredible to see what people can do. They are currently still offering the show virtually one Saturday a month. So you can check out their website. They're Aloft Circus Arts. And if you're looking for something to do on a Saturday night, go check out their free, or I'm sorry, it's not free, their program where they show off their student performers. It's called Sanctuary is the name of the program. All right, we're heading to the Loop next. So comedy fans, when improv legend Del Close died, what personal effect did he bequeath to the Goodman Theater? Frank's got it. It's his skull. So Del Close is a comedy legend who has mentored the likes of Jim Belushi and Bill Murray. And when he died in 1999, he bequeathed his skull to the theater in his will so that it would be used as a prop in Hamlet or any other productions. So that's where it is now. It sits on a red velvet pillow in the artistic director's office. It's in a lucite case, but there's a twist. So a few years after Close died, his business partner, Charna Halpern, admitted that it wasn't really his skull. The hospital refused to let her take his skull, and so she had to go get one at a medical supply store. She even pulled out some of the teeth to match the ones that Del was missing, apparently. So even though it's not really his skull sitting in the artistic director's office, I still think it's fair to say that he got the last laugh. And if anyone is enjoying this presentation and wants to leave me any body parts, I'd be happy to take cash instead. Okay. Showman's Rest is a burial plot for circus performers. Does anyone know what animal statues guard the graves of the departed performers? Rita and Frank got that one. Nina and J and D. Those would be elephants. Robert got it. So this plot is located in Woodlawn Cemetery, and it's a burial place for circus and outdoor performers called Showman's Rest. The Showman's League was founded in Chicago, and it is still here today. Fun fact, their first president was Buffalo Bill Cody. And just 1 year after they purchased this plot of land, in 1918, a terrible train accident led to 56 performers being buried in this plot. So because this is the early 1900s and they didn't have the records for all of the performers, they used their stage names on some of the graves, as you can see here for Baldy, and they also have some just labeled unknown male or unknown female. They have 5 elephant sculptures guarding the plot, and their trunks are lowered here, you can see, as a sign of mourning. So you can still visit the cemetery now. It's open if you want to get some fresh air. And legend is that you might hear some ghostly animal noises in the cemetery. This is probably just some noises coming from the Brookfield Zoo because there are no elephants actually buried here. I've been to an elephant graveyard actually, but that's a story for another day. All right, so there are a lot of speakeasy themed places in Chicago, but where can you watch a show in an authentic speakeasy? No guesses on this one? It's called a drifter. So this space actually operated as a speakeasy during Prohibition. It is located inside of the Green Door Tavern in the River North area of Chicago. And the Green Door's name refers to the Prohibition era practice of painting your door green to indicate a speakeasy or that you had paid the green to operate under Prohibition. So the entrance to the drifter, which is inside here, is hidden. But because you guys are all here, I'll fill you in. You enter the Green Door Tavern, you go downstairs, and you should see the door. If you don't see the door, it's hidden behind the tchotchke cabinet. So all of the decorations on the walls that you see in this photo and the old bottles were originally found in this space. After it was used during Prohibition, the space was just a storage area for many decades, and they just had a bunch of junk down there. So they found all these cool things when they cleaned it out. They also moved a water heater, and behind some drywall, they found a door in the wall where they transported the barrels of beer from the alley back in the day. So it's a really fun little bar. It only seats about 40 people, and they print their cocktails on tarot cards, and they have an act about once an hour, things like sword swallowing or hula hoop burlesque or magic. So it's a really fun place to put on your list to visit when we're able to visit bars indoors again. Okay. In the 1890s, 60% of Chicago's streets were paved with what material? You can still find a few alleys existing with this material today. Robert, Nina, Barbara, Lee, Ronald, a lot of people got this one. It is wood block. So at the time, wood was thought to be cleaner and quieter than having horses walk around on stone. And surprisingly, it actually held up pretty well against the Great Chicago Fire. So as I mentioned, there are a few places where you can see wood block today. They are mostly kind of falling apart, a little mossy, broken up. But the best preserved one is located in the Gold Coast, which is the one you see in this image. The Gold Coast Neighborhood Association actually paid $400,000 to restore the alley in 2011. So it's great if you want to go take a walk. It's a gorgeous neighborhood and look at some beautiful historic buildings, and you can actually walk in the footsteps of Chicago history in this historic alley. If you're looking for it, it's located right behind the Archbishop's Mansion. This is a pretty incredible statistic. Where in Chicago can you find the largest mass grave in the Western Hemisphere? I spent a lot of time in cemeteries for this book. It's a lot of fun. They're open right now, and they're beautiful parks to walk in. Looks like Robert got it. So a lot of people are saying Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park was a cemetery, and they supposedly moved all the graves out, but we know a lot of people are still buried there. And there is one tomb there that you can still see that is above ground, the Couch Mausoleum, and that is in the book. However, this place is at Oakwood Cemetery. So as I mentioned, I didn't grow up in Illinois, but I was pretty sure that there were no Civil War battles fought in Illinois. So I was surprised to learn that Chicago was home to a Confederate prison camp. Camp Douglas was located around modern-day Brownsville. It was called Camp Douglas because the land was donated by Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas. And it started out as a training camp for Union soldiers. But as prison camps started getting overcrowded and the war dragged on, they began housing Confederate soldiers. It quickly got overcrowded. It doubled the size of, doubled the number of prisoners who were actually intended to be there. And they had swampy conditions, poor sanitation. So it was nicknamed 80 Acres of Hell. It does not sound like a nice place to hang out. It was actually the most deadly Union prison camp of the war. And the 4,000 Confederate soldiers who died there are now buried in this mass grave. You can see this 23-foot monument has all of their names inscribed on it. So it's a big piece of Civil War history right here in Chicago that a lot of people don't know about. So the cemetery is open right now, as I mentioned, and there are some other people who are notable that you can visit there. Jesse Owens, Mayor Harold Washington is buried there, and Enrico Fermi, who worked on that nuclear reactor that we talked about earlier. Okay. What neighborhood do artists credit an underground energy vortex for helping them get creative? Guesses? This is in Fulton Market. So I am not super expert on vortices, so I'm going to read this one as well. Before it was home to Chicago's trendiest restaurants, Fulton Market earned a reputation as an enclave for warehouse parties and creative types. Those in the know attribute the abundance of creative talent to something more than natural skills, a vortex. What is a vortex? According to Mars Gallery, it is a center of creative energy that many people feel vibrate through their bodies and minds. People and animals are drawn to vortices, where energy exists on multiple dimensions and interacts with one's inner self. Vortex locations are usually reserved for Earth's mystical natural sites like Sedona, and they're rarely found in urban settings. However, Mars Gallery is reportedly located over one of these energy vortex circles. This force lends vibrational energy to the gallery and the surrounding area. When I'm all by myself, I can almost feel a low frequency, says artist and gallery owner Peter Mars. Whatever is going on seems to stimulate creativity. A lot of the artists have commented on it. But don't take Peter's word for it. In 2002, the Chicago Journal hired a shaman to inspect the vortex. Parapsychologist Nabila Musa examined the gallery with a walking stick, tapping the floor and the walls. His findings confirmed an energy vortex near the back of the gallery. If you're interested in tapping into this well of creative energy, head to the alley near Mars Gallery's rear loading dock. You'll know you've reached the epicenter when you see spray paint on the street and a collection of tokens that artists and other visitors leave to thank the vortex. Whether or not you feel a rush of creativity after visiting the vortex, you're bound to get inspired by the many galleries and creative spaces nearby. So when I went to the space to interview Peter Mars, the gallery owner, he asked me if I could feel the vortex, and I said I felt very happy and relaxed, but I didn't know if it was the vortex or just because I had just had lunch. So you'll have to go and judge it for yourself. As of a few months ago, the building was sold and the art gallery has relocated, so Mars Gallery is not there anymore. And I wonder if the new owners of the building know about the vortex, or if there's an additional charge in their agreement to purchase a building with a vortex on it. I'm not sure. All right, who's ready for a beer? What Chicago brewery is powered by food waste? Any beer drinkers in the audience? A lot of guesses for Goose Island. It's not the one. This is actually called Wider Beer Company. So Wider Beer Company is located inside a building called The Plant in the Back of the Yards neighborhood. And The Plant is located inside a former pork processing plant called Pure Foods. So you see they very cleverly changed the P in Pure Foods over to beer to indicate what goes on there now. Inside the plant it's all a vertical farm and business incubator focused on sustainable food production and energy consumption. So there are 16 businesses inside, and they're all working together sustainably. So for example, there's a coffee company in there, and when they're done with their burlap sacks, they donate them to the garden to make microgreens. and the yeast and wheat that are spent from the brewery are later used in the bakery. And this whole community is working on becoming powered by an anaerobic digester. So once they do that, they'll be able to use their organic waste as well as organic waste from other organizations around town who have committed to donate it, such as I believe the Shedd Aquarium is one of them. And they'll be able to go completely off the grid and power themselves based on that organic energy. So it's a very cool space to tour to see how they converted this old industrial building into this sustainable space and see how they've converted everything and how all of these different businesses work together. They have a weekly farmers market, and it is currently continuing online. So if you are interested in some very local produce, you can go online, and I believe you can purchase your order and then just go and pick it up at a specified time. So I'd recommend checking that out. And again, when it opens, go take a tour. It's very cool to see. And try the wine or beer. They have one called Meow with a cat. I think all their cans have cats on them, which is maybe why I like them, but Meow is a good one. All right. Museum of Surgical Science houses the death mask of an infamous ruler. Does anyone know who? If you need a hint, we've already talked about him once today. Stephen's on it. It is Napoleon. So Napoleon's death mask here is part of the fine art collection at the Surgical Science Museum. This is a plaster cast made from his death mask in 1821. And I was surprised to learn when I visited that in addition to having a lot of creepy old medical instruments, they have this fine art collection, they have a library and manuscripts, letters by Florence Nightingale, and beautiful paintings and sculptures that illustrate medicine throughout history. They even have like a contemporary art wing. So there's a lot going on in there. Of course, they have things like an iron lung and other crazy medical artifacts that will make you appreciate modern healthcare. One example is the set of ancient trephined skulls. So, you know, relieving some pressure in your head looked a little different back then, and I'm glad that we don't do that anymore. This is all located inside a mansion in the Gold Coast. So it's pretty close to that woodblock alley that I referred to earlier. And it's the only Gold Coast mansion that is open to the public. It was built by a socialite, and she designed it to resemble Versailles. So as you're walking around, appreciating modern healthcare and taking in all of this history of medicine, you're seeing, you know, chandeliers and marble floors and beautiful staircases. So it's a lovely space to visit. It's a beautiful and unique museum. Highly recommend. Okay. So the Rolling Stones wrote a song inspired by Chicago called 2120 South Michigan Avenue. What is there now? So I'm gonna try to play this clip while you're guessing. Oh, where'd it go? Ronald guessed it quickly, and Barbara, so that you don't have to watch me dancing. It's not Buddy Guy's Legends, although it is nearby. It is the former Chess Records, as Ronald and Barbara guessed, and Jackie. So it is now home to the Blues Heaven Foundation. And in the 1950s and 60s, it was the headquarters of Chess Records, the legendary R&B label. They produced hits like Johnny B. Good and Etta James's At Last. And blues legend Willie Dixon worked there as a musician for many, many years. And he created this foundation to preserve blues music's legacy and secure royalties for their artists. So you can tour the building and see a lot of artifacts and learn about Chicago's blues history. They still have intact their studio, which Keith Richards referred to as the perfect sound studio. And when I went to visit and you know, take photos for the book and interview them, there were people there from all over the world, from the UK, the Netherlands, and Hungary. And I was the only person there from Chicago. So I feel like it's an overlooked gem here in the city. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. They normally, during the summers, have one free concert night a week. It was Thursday nights last summer. So I'm not sure if they're going to get that going again, but check out their website and see if they're starting up the free music again. They have a garden next door to the museum. And I know there are plans to build another blues museum in the Loop, which is great. I love more museums, but I think it's very cool that this is located in the actual Chess Records facility, and you can still see the actual studio where these hits were recorded. So I'm a big music fan. It was a special one for me to visit. All right. Sports fans. Bohemian National Cemetery is the final resting place for which sports fans? I think Rita got it first. Baseball fans, Cubs fans, Rita, Robert, and Lee. That's correct. It's the Cubs. So I'm hoping that this is not as close as we get to baseball season this year, but 5 miles north of Wrigleyville, there's a plot here called Beyond the Vines, built especially for Cubs fans at Bohemian National Cemetery. So there is a columbarium, or a burial wall with space for 288 urns. They also have grave sites if you prefer to be buried. And the plot features a bullpen bench, stadium seats, home plate, and turf, all from Wrigley Field. You can see that people leave mementos like ticket stubs and baseball cards for their loved ones. And if Wrigley Field is your second home in life, it may be the best place for your afterlife. Right. Does anyone recognize where this is? It's in a museum. It is a part of a historic room now housed in a museum that a preservationist actually died trying to salvage. Robert and Corinne, Michelle, J and D. This is at the Art Institute of Chicago. So this is an example of, oh yeah, a few other people got it. Bob and Stephen. This is an example of a place in the book where the Art Institute is not a secret. It's one of the most famous institutions in the city. But within the Art Institute, I feel like this room really is a hidden gem. I'm a member of the Art Institute, and I feel like it took me a long time to actually stumble upon it. And it's got doors, so it's not immediately noticeable. And every time I go in there, it's just kind of a quiet space, so I don't feel like there's a lot of people hanging out in there usually, and many people might not know about it. So it was originally built as a Chicago Stock Exchange trading room in 1894 by the famous architectural duo of Louis Sullivan and Dinkmar Adler. It was slated for demolition in 1972 when Chicago was losing a lot of their historic buildings, unfortunately. And Richard Nickel was a photographer who helped document a lot of these beautiful historic buildings that are being lost and helped salvage some of these architectural treasures. So he spent months documenting this room before he tragically died in an accident at the construction site. So he never lived to see the trading room get reconstructed at the Art Institute, but they did reconstruct it, and you can visit it now. It's all been beautifully restored. You can see the level of detail in these images of, you know, the stenciling on the walls and the stained glass. It's just gorgeous. It's a beautiful, quiet space to admire all this craftsmanship and details that we almost lost forever. But thanks to people like Richard Nickel and other preservationists, we can enjoy them today. And as I mentioned, it's very quiet, reflective space. It's one of my favorite places in Chicago. Okay. So you may recognize this. It's not too far away. But I'm gonna put this up as a poll question here. just to see how many terminals are at O'Hare. All right, we've got guesses for 3, 4, 5, and 6. Looks like 4 and 5 are tied. 4 is edging it out a bit. Share that with you guys. So what is the answer? It is 4. Good job, guys. This stumps people sometimes. There are 4 terminals, but if you guessed 5, that may be because they are named 1, 2, 3, and 5. There is no terminal 4. There used to be a terminal 4 in the late 1980s, but they built a new international terminal and they closed number 4. They named the new terminal 5 to avoid confusing people so that you didn't go to number 4 in the old place and think that's where you're supposed to be. I don't know if that's less confusing or not, but when you walk into O'Hare, you see this sign, you can take a left and you'll immediately see a sign to your left that says Elevator Center 4. And this leads to a bus terminal, which is located where the former Terminal 4 used to be. So this is like my own private thing that I get excited about when I go to O'Hare and I look for the sign for Elevator Center 4, and I'm like, oh, that's where Terminal 4 used to be. So if you get excited about nerdy architecture, things like that, you can look out for the Elevator Center 4 sign as well. But I know there's some new construction going on at O'Hare. Does anyone know if they're going to name a new Terminal 4 or maybe a random number like 9? If you know, put it in the chat. I'd love to hear about it. Okay, it's a little bit of a spooky one. What Chicagoland cemetery is home to a woman whose body was exhumed after her mother had nightmares that her daughter was buried alive? It's not Resurrection. It's not Graceland. Although there are lots of stories in both of those. So this is actually in Mount Carmel Cemetery. This woman's name is Julia Bucola, and she died in childbirth in 1920. She was newlywed and she was buried in her wedding gown with her child. And so they nicknamed her the Italian Bride. A few months after she was buried, her mother, Philomena, started having nightmares that her daughter was buried alive, and she wanted to exhume the body. And everyone said, I'm so sorry for your loss. Just, go rest, and we're not going to exhume the body. And she kept at them, kept having nightmares. And they said, we're still not going to exhume the body. I'm so sorry. She's gone. And again, Philomena kept having nightmares. So this went on for 7 years of her trying to exhume the body. And she finally succeeded. And when she did, the results shocked everyone. Although the coffin was decomposing, Julia's body was perfectly preserved when they opened it. So the community took this as a sign from God, and they had this lavish marble sculpture built at her grave when she was reinterred. And you can see there are 2 photos on this sculpture. There is Julia here in her wedding dress on her wedding day, and then there's a photo here of her on the day where she was exhumed with her perfect looking skin 7 years after she was buried. There's a high school across the street, and some of the students have reported seeing a woman in white walking through the cemetery at night. So perhaps Julia never did go back into the ground, but you can visit her grave and look at the photo from the day she was exhumed and judge for yourself whether you think she went back in the ground or not. All right, I've got one more for you. Thanks for hanging with me. Where is the world's tallest church? It's a hint. It's in the stained glass here, which is pretty rare for a finished building to be in its own stained glass. Barbara got it. And Corinne? This is the First United Methodist downtown in the Loop. So maybe you'll recognize it now. It's located right next to Daly Plaza. So this congregation was actually founded in 1831 before Chicago was even a city. And they built this Gothic skyscraper here in 1924. So to get to the chapel that we're talking about, it's in the very top in the old bell tower on the 27th floor. And you take 2 elevators and a set of stairs to get all the way up there. So this is 568 feet above street level. So it's the highest place of worship above street level. There's also a church on the first floor, and the church owns the entire building, but they rent out a lot of the spaces, the floors in between, to attorneys and other people who are working in the Loop. It's, you know, some pretty valuable real estate that they have there. So they don't use the entire building as a church facility. In Germany, there is a building called Minster that is shorter. It's at 530 feet tall, but it is entirely dedicated to religious purposes. So that is their claim to fame. But we have the highest place of worship above street level. So either way, it's still a great view from up there. And normally they do offer free tours, I believe, daily, which is very neat that they invite people into their space and let them share in this historic and unique building. All right, so I would love to know next what your favorite secret places around Chicagoland are. As I mentioned, I got so many great ideas just from sharing with other people, and if you have any, I would love to hear them. If you are interested in checking out the rest of the book, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or your local bookstore at the Deerfield Library also. Or if you would like to order it directly from me, as a thank you for attending, I've got a 10% off code right here at secretchicagobook.com. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter or follow me on social media, you can find all of that information there too. So if anybody has any secret places to share or other questions for me, I'm all yours.
I do see a question in the chat box, Jessica, and that was awesome. I think I learn something new every time I listen.
Thank you.
So the question is, what happened to the mother who had her daughter exhumed, if you know?
What happened to her? I believe that she eventually left Chicago and moved to, some of her other children survived, and they moved to California. So I believe she moved to California with her other children, adult children, and lived with them. And according to some other research that a historian did, she was kind of a tough old bird and a pain to live with, but and her name was Philomena. If you look at her, her daughter's grave, she has her own name, Philomena, the mother, on there twice, saying like, I, Philomena, am the one who got my daughter exhumed. Not once, but twice. So
that's interesting,
she was a persistent woman.
She was right about something. Yeah, that's such an interesting story. Jill has a question. Do you know what 2 streets in Chicago go all 4 directions?
All 4 directions. Oh my gosh. All 4 directions. I don't think I do. What is it, Jill? Does anyone else know? Does anyone else know the answer? Oh, Whacker.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense. And Sheridan. Oh my gosh.
Something to research.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Jill. Oh, that's awesome.
So I see that a couple people had their hand raised during the presentation. So, and we weren't able to get everyone's question that way, but if you do still have a question, please put those in the chat. All right.
I love that 4 directions one. That's so great.
Add to the next book.
I know what I'm reading about tonight.
All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we can go ahead and get ready.
Oh, Rita's asking about Alta Vista Terrace. Yes. So this is, I mentioned this in my book in reference to a different neighborhood. Alta Vista Terrace is in Lakeview. It's pretty close to Wrigley Field.
Get that answered.
And it's unique because it's a street with some beautiful houses, but the architect built them so that the two sides of the street reflect each other. So the house on this corner down here is the same design as the house on this corner down here. And they're like a mirror image of each other, but flipped. So I have enjoyed walking down that street and taking pictures of one and then running across the street to the other side and taking a picture of its twin on the other side of the street. It's a beautiful historic street right near Wrigleyville.
I can't wait to get back out there and start exploring again for sure.
Yeah, I've learned so much writing this book, mostly that Chicago is interesting and weird and exciting, and I hope that this helped inspire everyone to visit somewhere that's new to them.
I do too. So we have another question from Rita. What town is unincorporated but surrounded by Chicago?
Oh, I know this one. Oh my gosh. Is it Norwood?
It's ringing a bell. I'm not sure.
Forest View. Okay.
Forest View.
That's a good piece of trivia. Lee is saying we grew up in Lakeview near Clark and Fullerton. There's a church part of the hospital. The hospital was torn down, but the church is preserved. Oh, wow. The church is in the high rise? Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
And Leslie is asking, at the beginning, you had a picture of a yellow building with a courtyard. What is that place?
Okay, I think I know which one you're talking about. I believe that's in the Fine Arts Building. Let me pull that up. Why isn't it coming up here in my PowerPoint? I believe that's the Fine Arts Building. Let me see here. Sorry. Way back at the beginning. The Fine Arts Building is located on Michigan Avenue, right across from Grant Park. Let's see if that works. Can you see that?
I see the end with questions.
Oh, sorry. Let me try one more time. And this building is really unique because it's got a lot of hopefully this is the one that you were talking about, Leslie. It's got a lot of music-related things. So there are like cello makers and music and dance lessons, and there's a theater, there's a sheet music store, and a lot of different instructors in there. So it's a very cool old building, and you walk through it and you can hear like piano playing on one floor, and then somebody singing opera on another floor, taking lessons, and walk by people making cellos and all kinds of different artists. So I really love visiting it. They have things like a Frank Lloyd Wright piece of stained glass at the end of one hallway, and they have some gorgeous old murals on another floor. So this is on one of the floors. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's called the Venetian Court. So it's just this little courtyard, and it's such a hidden gem. Like it's on maybe, I don't know, floor, maybe it's a fourth floor. So it's not on the ground level. You have to go up and go down a hallway and find the door that enters into it. And it's just such a gorgeous little space. Another cool thing about the Fine Arts Building is it's one of the only buildings in the city that is still operated by elevator operators. There's only one other that I know of. There may be more. But yeah, you go in and you press the buzzer and somebody, takes you up to the other floor. So that's the other thing. You hear the buzzers going up and down all the floors too. So definitely recommend checking out the Fine Arts Building. There's a lovely bookstore too.
We had another question from Wyatt. He's wondering if you had done the same type of research in Cleveland, or if you're going to move to other cities.
Oh man, well, I do. Anytime I go anywhere, I do a little bit of nerdy research and try to find some kind of hidden or unusual thing. So I have a blog and I try to post places from Chicago, and then I try to usually, when I send out my newsletter, do one place in Chicago and one thing that's related but in another city. So last month I did a, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on it? It was Secret Streets. Oh, so I was doing pothole art that's on the streets in Chicago, and then some underground art that was in Croatia. Anyways, I do try to do this research everywhere I go, and I write about it on my blog a little bit here and there. I have done some in my hometown in Cleveland, but I don't have enough to fill a whole book yet. I'm working on it.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions, so I guess we can wrap things up. We're at 7:30. So anyway, thank you so much. And if you come up with another book, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
That was awesome. So, and hopefully we can see everybody back at the library sometime soon. I'm just gonna share my screen really quick so you can see a couple of the programs that we have coming up. And just a second.
Oh yeah, I can stop sharing mine.
All right. So thank you. We have a couple more programs coming up soon. In June, we have composting with Swalco. That's actually on June 30th. We have a pop-up program, Healthcare Equity and COVID-19. We're excited about that one. That will be on June 24th. And genealogy, using immigration records to study your family history. So that should be great as well. So thank you everybody for coming, and we hope you have a great night.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Bye everyone. Have a good night.